1. Author and era Baruch Benedictus de Spinoza was born into Amsterdam's Portuguese Jewish community and was excommunicated from it in 1656 at 23, with the harshest herem ban in the community's history. The reasons remain unclear. His philosophical views were certainly radical, denying the personal God of biblical religion, the immortality of the individual soul, and the divine origin of the Torah. He never joined another religious community. He earned his living as a lens grinder and refused a professorship at Heidelberg to maintain his intellectual independence. His was among the most sequentially brilliant minds of the 17th century. His Ethics, published posthumously in 1677, constructs a complete metaphysical system: God, nature, mind, emotion, freedom, using the method of Euclidean geometry, definitions, axioms, propositions, demonstrations, corollaries. 2. The book's genesis, the ethics demonstrated in geometrical order, was Spinoza's life work, revised over more than a decade, published only after his death from tuberculosis at 44. He knew it would be dangerous. His earlier theological political treatise, 1670, had been banned. The geometric method was not mere affectation. It embodied Spinoza's deepest philosophical conviction that the universe is a rationally structured whole, that human reason can, in principle, comprehend, that philosophy's task is to exhibit the logical necessity of what exists, not merely to describe it contingently. Without the ethics, pantheism would lack its most rigorous philosophical formulation, and the account of freedom as understanding one's own determination rather than escaping it would lose its most profound articulation. 3. Main themes: God or nature as the one infinite substance. What is the ultimate reality? Spinoza's answer is radical. There is only one substance, which he calls God or nature, Deus sive Natura. This substance has infinite attributes, of which we know two: thought and extension. Everything that exists is a mode of this one substance, including human beings. The impossibility of free will in the ordinary sense. Are human beings free? Not in the sense of being uncaused causes. Every mental and physical event is determined by prior causes, following from the necessity of God's nature. The will is not a separate faculty that can override the causal order. It is itself a product of that order. Emotions as confused ideas. What are emotions? Not irrational forces opposed to reason, but confused ideas, adequate ideas distorted by partial understanding. The power of an emotion to disturb the mind is proportional to the inadequacy of the ideas it involves. Freedom as adequate understanding. If everything is determined, what can freedom mean? For Spinoza, freedom is not the absence of determination, but acting from the determination of one's own nature, rather than from external compulsion. The free person is determined by reason and understanding. The enslaved person is determined by confused passions arising from inadequate ideas. 4. Summary. The ethics' geometric architecture organizes 5 parts. 1. God. 2. The nature and origin of the mind. 3. The origin and nature of the emotions. 4. Human bondage, or the power of the emotions. 5. Human freedom, or the power of the intellect. Part 1 establishes Spinoza's monism through definitions and demonstrations. Substance is what is in itself and conceived through itself. Definition 3. Substance can have only one existence of each kind, therefore there is only one substance infinite with infinite attributes. This substance is what theology calls God and what physics calls nature, identical. Part 2 analyzes the human mind as an idea of which the body is the object. Mind and body are not two substances, but two attributes of the one substance, seen under different aspects. There is no interaction problem. Mental events and physical events are the same events described under different attributes. Parts 3 and 4 analyze the emotions, affectus, desire, pleasure, pain, and their power to determine human behavior. Human beings are typically in bondage, acted upon by external forces whose adequate understanding they lack, and therefore pulled by confused passions, fear, hope, pride, envy, hatred, that they mistake for free choices. Part V describes the path to freedom. Through adequate understanding of what we and our emotions are, we increase our power of acting from our own nature rather than being driven by external compulsion. The highest good is the intellectual love of God, amor intellectualis Dei, the mind's recognition of itself as a mode of God's infinite intellect, which is experienced as a form of blessedness. 5. Deep dive analysis. Spinoza's doctrine of parallelism. The claim that mind and body are not two substances that interact, but two attributes of the one substance, is the ethics' most elegant and most radical move. It dissolves the Cartesian interaction problem. How do an unextended mind and extended body causally affect each other? By denying that they are genuinely distinct. The argument, there is only one substance, it can be considered under the attribute of thought, giving the mental description of reality, or under the attribute of extension, giving the physical description. These are not two different things described from two different perspectives. They are the same thing, which can be described in two incommensurable but parallel ways. Every mental event has a corresponding physical event, not because one causes the other, but because they are the same event described differently. The most powerful implication is anti-dualist. The mind-body problem, as Descartes posed it, is a pseudo-problem generated by treating thought and extension as distinct substances. Once they are seen as attributes of the one substance, the problem dissolves, though the question of how two incommensurable descriptions can apply to the same thing generates its own difficulties. Contemporary philosophy of mind finds Spinoza surprisingly congenial. Dual aspect theory, neutral monism, Russell, Nagel, and certain versions of physicalism share Spinoza's rejection of substance dualism while trying to preserve the irreducibility of mental properties. His insistence that there is a mental aspect to everything that exists, panpsychism in a refined form, has been revived by contemporary philosophers, Galen Strawson, Philip Goff. The strongest objection is the explanatory gap. Even if we accept that mental and physical descriptions are two attributes of one substance, this doesn't explain why they go together as they do. Why does this physical process correspond to this mental experience? Spinoza's answer that the correspondence follows necessarily from the nature of substance may be true while still leaving us without the kind of explanation we were looking for. 6. Key terms and ideas. Deus sive natura, Latin, God or nature. Spinoza's equation of God with the natural universe, not as a personal deity, but as the one infinite substance of which all things are modes. Controversial in his time, a source of pantheism's philosophical respectability since substantia, Latin, substance, what exists in itself and is conceived through itself, requiring no other concept for its understanding. Spinoza argues there can be only one such substance, God or nature, attributum, Latin, attribute, what the intellect perceives as constituting the essence of substance. We know too, thought, cogitatio, and extension, extensio. Spinoza allows that there may be infinitely many, modus, Latin, mode, everything that exists in another, i.e., in substance rather than in itself. Individual human beings, stones, ideas, and emotions are all modes of the one substance. Conatus, Latin, striving, each thing's drive to persist in its own being, what Spinoza calls the actual essence of the thing, the root of all emotion and desire. The conatus of the mind is will, of the mind and body together is appetite. Amor intellectualis Dei, Latin, intellectual love of God, the highest human good, achieved when the mind understands itself as a mode of God's infinite intellect. This understanding produces a form of blessedness, beatitudo, that is its own reward and constitutes the highest form of human freedom. Subspecie eternitatis, Latin, under the aspect of eternity, the perspective from which adequate understanding of reality occurs, seeing things not as contingently existing in time, but as following necessarily from the nature of God, the philosopher's aspiration. 7. Conclusion. The ethics permanently established rationalist metaphysics as a genuine alternative to empiricism, changed the terms in which the mind-body problem could be discussed, and provided the most rigorous philosophical formulation of pantheism, the view that God and nature are identical. Its influence on Leibniz, who engaged it carefully and anxiously, on the German idealists, Schelling declared Spinozism or nothing as the choice facing metaphysics, on Goethe, Hegel and Einstein, who famously said he believed in Spinoza's God, is enormous. Contemporary philosophy of mind returns to Spinoza regularly when looking for alternatives to Cartesian dualism. The most unresolved question: does Spinoza's account of freedom, acting from one's own nature rather than external compulsion, constitute genuine freedom? Or is it a sophisticated reconceptualization of determinism that abandons the original concept entirely? The essential spirit of the ethics. Freedom is not the absence of necessity, but the understanding of it, and that understanding achieved is the closest thing to blessedness that a finite mode of the infinite can experience. Read it and encounter the most ambitious attempt since Aristotle to derive everything from first principles and marvel at how far it gets.